Hi everyone and welcome to today's painting tutorial where I'll take you through how I painted this Space Marine from the Atlantean Spears Space Marine chapter. So over a grey sear undercoat, I'm just going to begin by getting some contrast medium onto my palette. And then I'm going to be doing a mix of Dark Angel's green contrast and Achillean green contrast. Now I did want to show you this step as it was a little bit tricky just to get it to the exact colour that I wanted it to. I did test out a few different contrasts to try this, but ultimately I decided to go on these two, as it created the sort of blue-green that I was going for. And as you can see, just testing it on the rocks as well, just to make sure before beginning applying it to the rest of the Space Marine. And as you can see, I've just added some more contrast medium to it, as I just wanted to thin it down a little bit more. And of course, once I was happy with it, I'm just going to begin applying that over the entire miniature. So with the contrast paint now dry, I'm going to begin base coating the entire miniature, well, all of the armor I should say, with a 50-50 mix of Temple Guard Blue and Cabalite Green. Again, I did do some experimenting with this before going ahead and deciding on the color, but I was very happy with this mix. With the base coat now done, I wanted to begin highlighting it, and again, I spent a little bit of time just playing around with colours on the palette, but I decided to go with Gauss Blaster Green. Now I have mixed, as you can see on my paint palette, I have mixed it through, and I've also used some paint retarder just to help keep the longevity of the paint before it dries. So with the mix on the palette, I have just run Gauss Blaster Green, so as you can see on the right hand side, and then gradually just mixed it through the center as well, just so I can work my way up gradually. So as you can see, I've just worked through the highlights all the way up to Gauss Blaster. Well, it's almost Gauss Blaster. There is a little bit of that previous mix mixed through it as well. But for the most part, this final highlight will be the Gauss Blaster Green. And if you do like this color, I highly recommend getting an empty pot and mixing 50-50 of Temple Guard Blue and Cape-Black Green, as it was the exact colour that I was going for this particular colour scheme. So as you can see, I've already applied the Retributor armor to the helmet, and I've also applied a small amount of Agrax Earthshade. And now I'm just going to begin highlighting that with some Elven Gold by Scale 75. And now for the second highlight, I'm just going to use some gold by Vallejo. Now with the Atlantean Spears, their gold helmets are quite vibrant, which is why you'll see me work up to quite a light sort of gold. And for the final step, I'm just going to use some Citrine Alchemy, but I'm also just going to put a little bit of that gold Vallejo with that, and eventually work up to the Citrine Alchemy itself. And as you can see, I really don't have much on my brush at all. I'm just really gradually trying to bring this up. Admittedly, metallics still aren't a strong point for me. It's something that I still have a lot of practice ahead for me, but it is a lot of fun to paint. And just for the trim on the shoulder pad, just follow the same steps as I've shown you here with the helmet. So with those steps now done, I'm going to be moving on to the lenses and the scopes. So just using a simple base coat of Sotek Green, I'm just going to begin base coating the lenses and eventually working my way up through to Temple Guard Blue and some white as well. And as always with lenses, if you ever need to go back and correct them, the best way, in my opinion, is just to go back to that base coat and just bring down the intensity of the white or the first highlight. As usually when you see Space Marine lenses, that white line at the bottom is usually quite thin. And now for the chapter symbol, I'm just going to use some black by Vallejo. Again, any black acrylic will do just fine. Now, as I always mention for chapter symbols, just make sure that you have a reference up in front of you. It just makes it that much easier. So we're just going to be painting the trident symbol today for the Atlantean spears. And as you can see at this point, the chapter symbol is a little bit large for my liking, so I'm going to come back in just a moment and correct that with one of our previous mixes. So occasionally you'll find this does happen. It is difficult to get the chapter symbols, particularly when doing freehand, to get them spot on every single time. But that's all good, because you can always go back and correct them, as you can see here. So I've just gone back to my mix of Temple Guard Blue and Cabalite Green, and I'm just going to begin reshaping the trident to a point of which I'm happy with, particularly the center of the spear. As you can see, it's just far too large. Another important thing to remember when painting something like this is just to make sure that it is symmetrical, at least as much as you can. It is quite difficult to get something like this absolutely dead even on both sides. Especially, you know, with that said, being painted on a 3D miniature as well can definitely be quite difficult, but it's certainly fantastic practice. At that point I was really happy with the chapter symbol, so I'm just going to move on to all of the metallic parts. So just with a simple base coat of Leadbelcher, and then I'm going to follow that up with a highlight of Ironbreaker and some Stormhost Silver, just to finish it all off. And this will apply for all of the metal parts around the miniature. So now for the next step, for the pouches, the gun, the grenade, and the belts, I'm just going to use a base coat of German Grey just over the Vallejo Black. Now I should mention as well, I do really like Vallejo Black because it has more of a matte finish than a Baden Black. So depending on what you're working on, of course, as to whether or not that would be better than a Baden Black. There are plenty of cases where I do prefer a Baden Black. But for this particular model, I did want to go with the Vallejo Black. And just using my Raphael 8404 size 1 to get those nice fine lines. And sharp edge highlights as well. And I wanted to keep, due to the vibrancy of the armor, and of course the gold, I wanted to keep all of the black parts of the model, you know, quite dull. So you'll notice as well I'm only using German grey, and I'm just going to follow up that highlight with, well, that base coat I should say, just with a simple highlight of Dawnstone. And here are some photos of the completed Space Marine of the Atlantean Spears chapter. So I hope you found this tutorial useful today. I actually chose to do this one because one of my YouTube subscribers asked if I could get around to it, and I'm really glad that you recommended it because it was a lot of fun to paint. So for anyone else, if you have any chapter recommendations that you'd like to see, just leave a comment below, and I will see you in the next one.